Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Celebrating Diverse Voices Town Hall, another in our series. Before I forget, if you missed any of the past sessions, you can go on the DetroitChamber.com website and see all of them in full, and we've had some really great speakers. So I'm really excited that today we have Stephen Henderson, WDET 101.9, and Rhonda Walker of WDIV-TV. Before I introduce, please let me remind you, there is a question box that you on the side of your screen. You can submit questions. My colleague, Bernard Parker, will be monitoring them, and after about 15 minutes of conversation between Stephen, Rhonda, and I, Bernard will post some of those questions. We apologize if we don't get to all of them, but we will do our best. And then from there, we'll do some more discussions towards the end of the program. So happily, I am so happy to do this. Stephen Henderson, contributor for One Detroit and DPTV and host at WDET 101.9 FM, and Rhonda Walker, anchor at WDIV-TV for NBC. These are both brilliant journalists who've committed to serving the Detroit community and giving back and uplifting others. So today we're going to hear their view as journalists on the biggest challenges that our city faces and improving economic equity, creating opportunities for Detroiters, and their own community work with the Rhonda Walker Foundation and the Tuxedo Project. So without any further, I'd like to get started because I've got some great questions to get things started. But the first one, I'll pose this to both of you because I think you may both have your own perspectives. So last week, the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy hit a milestone, breaking ground on the last piece of the East Riverwalk. And we know the Riverwalk serves as one of the most dramatic transformations in Detroit resurgence. Where do you think we are, Rhonda, Stephen? Where do you think we are in terms of Detroit's revitalization overall? Rhonda, I'll let you go first.
I think about my entire professional career, about 25 years or so, and I think we've just been in this perpetual revitalization where we kind of see this renaissance happening, and maybe we see a setback, and then we're back on it again. And I think the pandemic obviously has been a major setback in the past year, but I think the momentum has still been going. We're just such a resilient city, and a lot of work is being done from, the complete revitalization that we've watched happening in downtown Detroit. I just think that we need to understand that all of these things take time, even with the riverfront. We've watched the process of the Detroit Riverwalk and the riverfront and the DeQuinder Cut. this has been over a decade. Some of these things just take so long. I don't know if that's unique to our city, but I'm thankful to watch the progress. And I think that is continuing. There's an increased level of support and investment that I've been witnessing in the city of Detroit from corporations, from, just this importance of having a footprint in the city, and not just, where your people work or where your headquarters is, but also what are you doing for the community in which you are. And I only see that continuing to grow.
Stephen.
So, I think, it is very much this, still this tale of two cities that I think we're grappling with. And the recent report that we got from Detroit Future City, which is called the State of Economic Equity in Detroit, really laid out what has happened in the last 10 years, which is that we've had this incredible resurgence in certain parts of the city. Downtown looks like it hasn't since I was a small child. The riverfront is a place that, I never went as a child because it was industrial and dangerous. My kids have grown up with that as essentially their backyard park. There are all kinds of things that are really different and great about Detroit, but there are lots of parts of the city, and there are lots of people in the city who aren't experiencing all of that, and who are really being left behind. I have always thought that the challenge, the pivot point for all of that is city government. City government is supposed to get people excited about investing in and opening up opportunities in Detroit. but it is also supposed to take that investment and interest and make it matter for the people who live here. And I think the latter part of that equation is still a real challenge for us. And I think this report really lays out how starkly that difference has played out over the last decade.
So let's take off on that just a little bit, based on your last comments for Stephen. How do you think we're doing in terms of creating opportunities for Detroiters and spreading the momentum into the neighborhoods? You know, what have we done right? What are we getting wrong as a region? I know there's been a lot of effort to try and do more with the neighborhoods. We have our own program called Neighbor Hub to help some of these smaller communities to help their businesses grow. But I'd like both your perspectives on how you think we're doing as far as momentum in the neighborhoods.
You were flowing, Stephen. I was letting you take it.
I can go first this time if you like. You know, I think if you want to grade on effort, I think we get really high grades. I mean, I think, especially in the last 5 or 6 years, there's been a lot of attention, institutional attention especially, on the idea that you've got to make this momentum that's happening in downtown and midtown and on the riverfront, some of the high-end neighborhoods, you got to make it matter in other places. And so there are a lot of programs that have come up and locked into place. There's a lot of people, you know, Dan Gilbert is a great example, whose focus was exclusively downtown at one point, whose focus now is kind of all over the city, and is spending a lot of money doing a lot of things that should make a difference. You know, outcomes are slow, and there are a couple of reasons for that. One is that, you know, we are dealing with really intractable problems that have existed for a really long time in our community. I mean, we've left people behind for generations. So the idea that, you know, flipping a switch would bring them along is kind of unrealistic. And so there's a lag there in terms of outcome. There's also just still a disconnect in a lot of communities. You know, there are a lot of Detroiters whose lives struggle to get beyond the block where they live. I mean, literally, where anything that is not right there and available for them is kind of out of reach. And I don't know that we have quite figured out yet how to bridge that gap universally. I mean, we're doing better in some places, but there are a lot of places where people's lives are still so isolated that they don't get touched by the opportunities that are now starting to crop up. And so I think the challenge again is to figure out how to close that last gap, how to make sure that the things that are possible are actually accessible for everybody who lives here.
And I think the access is coming to some degree, like when we're talking about some of these plans and developments and different things that are coming to the city of Detroit, and that requirement that a certain percentage of the people that work there have to be city residents. But I agree with you in what I said off the top, like, you know, this resilience, this revitalization that we want to see. We think like, well, what about the neighborhoods? Like this should be happening right now. But to your point, Stephen, you know, I just think that we are in a good place in terms of our momentum and focus and understanding the investment and, you know, just understanding the people of Detroit and how to reach them. But I think it's still, you know, even just the trust factor of Detroiters, knowing that this is genuine and that you really are coming into my neighborhood to help me and not take it away. Right. So, you know, a lot of that needs to happen. But, you know, we've done countless stories on, you know, even from generations back of like, you know, the plants coming in and having an opportunity to work there and build a life and a career and, you know, a beautiful middle class family and raising your kids. And so, you know, I think that is happening again. But, you know, there's many challenges. I mean, even just in the skilled trades, just getting, you know, workers into these fields, there's tons and tons of jobs available, but, you know, getting that work ethic, getting that desire to see a future and a career in this. It takes education. It takes getting people out of the house to come to these opportunities. And how do you do that? Because I believe the opportunity is there. A lot of opportunity is there. A lot of jobs are there, but actually getting Detroiters to take advantage of these opportunities is sometimes been a challenge. And I don't say that we blame the residents, but we need to understand them and understand where they're coming from, understand, like you were saying, Stephen, kind of these years of just challenge and despair, to see that there's new opportunity.
Well, those comments by both of you is a great segue for me to talk about you and what you're doing in the city. So obviously supporting youth in our city is something that the Chamber supports very much so through programs like our Detroit Promise Scholarship Program. But the Rhonda Walker Foundation has been empowering inner city teens in Detroit for 18 years now. Why is this work so important to you, and what impact is the Girls into Women program having?
So it's important because I believe that any child in the city of Detroit can accomplish anything that their counterpart child in the suburbs with a lot more opportunity, a lot more resource, a lot more support, maybe better schools, better exposure. If you gave a kid in the inner city the exact same thing, you would see incredible outcomes. And so for me, my goal is, how do I take these kids that are growing up in the inner city and give them as much as I can that, their more privileged suburban counterparts have, so that they can realize their greatest potential too. And so, and I want to back up a little bit, because my upbringing, I was raised by two college educated parents. My dad has a doctorate degree in education, and my mom has a master's in social work. We weren't a wealthy family. My parents are educators, public service, but I knew the importance of education, and I had a solid upbringing in a two-parent home. And there's some advantage to that. There's some privilege to that I had growing up with such stability. But we also always gave back. We always mentored. We always had kids in the house. We always, gave during the holidays. That's kind of how we were raised. And so early on in my professional career, working in broadcast journalism, you are incredibly exposed to the biggest problems in the city where you're working. And for me, I could just see that there was a need among the youth, and that there was something I could do about it. I looked about my network of friends that are entrepreneurs, very successful businesswomen in law, in medicine. And I knew that if I could show these kids, like, look, she went to Cass Tech too. She went to Martin Luther King High School too. She went to Renaissance too. She grew up, she went to Bates Academy. Like, if they could see kids that actually grew up in their same community that are now thriving professional adults, they can visualize that this is something that they can accomplish too. And so that was kind of my original thought, was just like having, these one-on-one mentoring relationships, which can be huge. And then it just kind of rippled from there. We have 6 pillars in our organization, from career and personal development, college preparation. We do year-round tutoring. We do the standardized test prep courses. Really pumping in, like, the money that the suburban kids would have to give, to help, their parents, to help the kids, with the SAT and ACT test prep course. Those are expensive. There's a lot of kids in the city of Detroit that just their families can't afford that. But if they were able to have that tutoring and that support, they could probably kill that exam. And so that's just my goal. And in addition to that, just, I've taken the kids up north. Even I grew up in the Lansing area. I was born in Detroit, raised in Lansing. My family never went up north. I never went north of Flint. I didn't even know what it was, but you hear once you get to college at Michigan State, like, we're going up north, we're going to Boyne, we're going here. So I'm like, well, I want these kids when they're young to know what it is. So we've gone all the way to the Upper Peninsula. We crossed the Mackinac Bridge. We've been to the UP. We've gone skiing and snowmobiling. We've been ice fishing. And so I just want the kids to have all types of experiences so that it's level, you know, in every way, from their personal experiences and exposure to also their educational support.
Well, I've had the pleasure to see firsthand the work you do and the amazing young ladies, and you know how committed they are to their education. They have high goals, so congratulations on that.
Thank you, and thank you for being so supportive.
So Stephen, your effort to revitalize your childhood home and neighborhood through the Tuxedo project started several years ago. What has that experience been like, and what's next for the project? And maybe you want to talk a little bit about what the project is first.
Sure. So the Tuxedo project is a literary arts and community center that I started actually in the home that my family lived in when I was born, over in the neighborhood behind St. Cecilia Church and school and gym near Livernois and Grand River. You know, it's a neighborhood that has seen nothing but disinvestment and depopulation since I was born. The house that we lived in was abandoned and stripped. And, you know, at some point, I think it dawned on me that that there was an opportunity to turn things in a different direction, and that if I got involved, we might be able to do that. And so I thought, well, you know, my life has been sort of configured around the power of words and ideas to inspire change. And so that was how we came up with the idea of it being a literary center. We have book clubs and writing workshops and classes and all those kinds of things there. But we also have been really focused on community change, building community infrastructure, which had been absolutely non-existent in the neighborhood. There wasn't even a block group over there when we started. We now have an actual community association that the residents there run and manage. We've started, of course, working on you know, property management. There were 40 houses on that block when I was born. When I went back, 23 of them were abandoned, so more than half the block. So we have been working on getting those houses down, thinking with the neighbors there about what should come next. We've been dealing with the food insecurity that of course affects our neighbors, as it does so many people in the city, trying to figure out long-term and short-term solutions to make sure that people have the food that they need. And then we were also really focused on the idea of opportunity, that people need more. They need to be able to get to a better place. And soon after we started, the Carpenters and Millwrights Union here in the state decided that they were going to consolidate all their training centers in Southeast Michigan and one site in Detroit, and spend $30 million building a new training facility. They chose a site at the end of our block. And so now all of a sudden, first of all, there's investment. I mean, someone spends $30 million in your neighborhood, that changes things in and of itself. But that training center, which trains journeyman carpenters and millwrights, is a real path forward for people in our neighborhood and all over the city. And so we've pivoted some to thinking about ways that we need to get people ready, prepared to be able to take advantage of that opportunity. Again, when we're talking about those gaps between what's there and what people find accessible, we're trying to sort of stand in that gap right now and get people the opportunity to do that. And so the neighborhood is changing very rapidly. You know, in addition to building this facility, the Carpenters also negotiated with the city to make other improvements. So 150 of the abandoned houses in the neighborhood are slated to come down. They are coming down in a very rapid succession right now, which is in and of itself just mind-blowing. They're rebuilding the streets and sidewalks and getting new lighting. So it's been a very fast, you know, potential turnaround for the neighborhood. But of course, there's a lot of work ahead in terms of making sure, again, that this investment matters who live there, our neighbors.
Well, that's a significant commitment on your part to make that difference, Steve, and both of you. Very significant commitments to the city, to the neighborhoods, to the youth. So thank you both for that service. And I think what I'll do now is turn it over to my colleague Bernard Parker for a couple of questions from our participants.
Thank you, Tammy.
You're welcome.
Hey, Tammy, thank you. So Rhonda and Stephen, we touched a little bit this morning as we were waiting to come on about diversity. And Rhonda, you recall I kind of pointed out, Stephen, that diversity is not always about black and white. I mean, you both, one's a graduate of U of M, the other's a graduate of Michigan State. Even though you happen to be two phenomenal, incredibly nationally known journalists that are black, you both do different stuff, right? Rhonda does WDIV in the morning, sort of a television media. Stephen, I don't know what kind of category to put you in, my brother, through the Black Journal, radio, Free Press, Pulitzer Prize. But y'all add a flavor, as my grandmother would say, a great gumbo to media and folk and journalism. So my question to you real quick is, what is the value of diversity in the newsroom?
It's essential. One of the things in our newsroom that has been great since I got there is that, traditionally, back in the day, this was a very male-dominated industry from, management perspective. Then on air, we started seeing more women, but behind the scenes, it still was more run by men. But I am in a very, as Stephen knows, female managed establishment. So just having a strong presence of men and women is so important. And then the variety of ages. I work with, young 20-somethings out of college. Somehow in my 20+ year career, I'm now one of the older people in the newsroom. But diversity is cool. Like, who wants to be around someone that's exactly the same age and looks exactly like them? I mean, what perspective you get. And I think as journalists, we're privileged because, our jobs require us, in any given day to have interaction and discussion and interviews with all walks of life. And I know myself over the years, between my job on TV and my work with the foundation and all the, different, partnerships and supporters and sponsors that we've had over the years, that my friend base, my social network is from 20-somethings to people in their 70s, from every single racial background and gender. And, having that type of diverse relationships allows you to relate with people better, communicate with people better, understand people, another person's perspective in a way that you never would if you isolated yourself to just, one kind of linear type of group. So it's, I love it.
Awesome. Stephen?
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, I think diversity matters. Diversity matters not just as one of the issues in a newsroom. I think it's the issue in many newsrooms across the country and many newsrooms here in Detroit. You think about a city like Detroit and its makeup, it's really fabulous and rich diversity that should be reflected in the newsrooms where the Detroit story is being told.
Mm-hmm.
End sentence. I mean, there is no debate about that. And we struggle with that here. We struggle with that here pretty mightily. You mentioned that I wear a number of different hats around town. One of the hats that I wear is founding and executive editor of Bridge Detroit, which is a news and engagement organization that's focused on telling that Detroit story from the perspective of Detroiters, both in terms of engaging with Detroiters themselves, but also our staff reflects the majority population of the city. There's majority African American and Latino. In fact, it's all African American and Latino. That kind of diversity is new in the news business. It is a departure from the things that we have been doing and struggling with in mainstream newsrooms for a really long time, but I also think it's a model for what we ought to be doing in the future. You cannot tell the story of a city like Detroit without reflecting the population of that city in your newsroom. I think there's a fundamental disconnect there that we don't talk enough about, and that we haven't moved fast enough to try to undo.
And I'll say that, you know, kind of the wake of George Floyd, and, you know, just this renewed attention on diversity and inclusion and equality has changed the focus of our newsroom. There have been voices that may not have been in the room for certain decisions that now are there, with the specific reason of saying we need to broaden how, you know, we are managing what we're putting on the air and how we're telling these stories. It has changed significantly in the past year. We've had some new hires into WDIV that have been a direct reflection of that, and I have been watching that happen, and I know both of you have too, in companies throughout this city. So, I mean, it's a horrible tragedies that we've been watching, but the change is very real. I'm seeing an investment in a way that I have never seen before, in a more fair, inclusive newsroom, and I'm really proud of that.
So before I turn this over to Tammy, please allow me one more question. Through the Detroit Regional Chamber, through Sandy and Tammy's leadership, the executive management team, they were kind enough to give us a 1 day a month, sort of as a mental health day. And let me tell you, Stephen, coming from county politics, you had no mental health because everything was real time on. So you talk about, you know, a brother having to assimilate. It was, you know, I didn't know how to like sit down and take and relax Bernard and take the regional chamber and put it on a shelf. It's totally difficult. It's something I'm learning. And I know Sandy's probably laughing at that right now. So my question to you both, okay, what do you do for self-care as Black journalists, giving some of the things that you've reported on, as Rhonda said, you know, the Floyd thing, Stephen, you know, your Black Journal segment you got coming up, and so many different pieces changing in the city. What do y'all do for self-care, mental self-care?
I play golf. You know, I probably am not the best self-care person. I'm not a spa girl. I'm not, you know, I've just kind of tough things out. I think I got it from my mom, that you just power through. And, you know, there's been some tough days, some tough news days for sure. You know, where my co-anchor and I will just sit at our desk and just like, we're exhausted. It's hard, you know, it's between the pandemic and, you know, everything happening with racial injustice and, you know, just watching, particularly in our community, the Black community, just, you know, a lot of fear and frustration and anger and anxiety and depression. It's just been heavy. It's been really, really heavy. But I don't know. I just, you know, I'm one of those kind of, you create your own happiness type of people. And despite everything that's going on, I always believe it's going to get better. I always have a glass half full approach to life and, you know, hope. And I just kind of hang on to that whenever I get in a funk, you know, but also take breaks from it. You know, I'm not tethered all the time on the weekends. I mean, I'll look at my push alerts, but I don't have to go in and read the whole story. I don't have to, you know, watch every newscast all weekend long. But Monday through Friday, I'm very plugged in, but I do try to unplug a little bit on the weekends. And then Michigan summers, you can't beat a nice round of golf.
Thank you. Stephen?
So
yes.
one of the things that the pandemic taught me more than anything else has is that the two things that have the most value in our lives are time and people. They're the two things we absolutely cannot ever replace. And so I have really been focused on turning more of my attention to valuing time with the people who matter in my life, and really taking dramatic steps to step away from stuff in order to do that. You've got to know what matters, and you have to cherish what you can't replace. Unfortunately, I think it takes sometimes something like a pandemic to remind us of that, but it was such a stark and painful reminder that I don't think I can see it another way. So that, I think that is the ultimate self-care.
Thank you both. So in closing, Rhonda, when you're on in the morning with Evrod, Stephen on with ABJ, I want you all to remember me, okay? And know I'm watching you guys. Uh-oh. All right.
Like wiggle my ear to let
Thank
you
you. I think our time is running out, so I'm going to switch it back to Tammy.
know. Okay.
All right.
That went by too fast.
Didn't it though? I know, it always goes by so fast. I want to thank you both. You are both really great journalists in our city. You're not afraid of representing the voices, as Rhonda said, but also, Stephen, not afraid to tackle the tough issues and bring up something that's uncomfortable. So that's what really makes a difference and changes a community. But then also talking about community, it's not just your professional job, it's your commitment to the community and to service, which goes above and beyond. So thank you for all you do. Thanks for being here with us today. It was a great time chatting with you.
Thank you for the invitation. I enjoyed the chat. Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, thanks, Rhonda.
Thank you everyone for joining us, and I hope you have a great day.